Welcome to our December ESS. We are excited to have you here, and the sweaters look awesome. To begin, could I have a show of hands who is here for the first time? Perfect, welcome. And what about the second time? Perfect, thank you for coming back. All right, so we have an awesome speaker here today. Nebraska native Wendy Townley has been writing personally since the 3rd grade, professionally since 1997. Her first book, Nerdy 30, was published in 2010. With bachelor's and master's degree in journalism and communication, respectively, from the University of Nebraska at Omaha, she serves as executive director of the Omaha Public Library Foundation. She also teaches part-time for the University of Nebraska at Omaha School of Communication. Letters of Barley, Personal Stories My Dog Should Know was published earlier this year. So, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so nice to be here. As I was telling some of you, I am a Gross grad. So Scott seemed so far away from home, but I know several people who graduated from here and had really good experiences. So thank you all again for such a nice turnout. I know when I reached out to Justin in July, right after my book came out, I thought, oh, I'll be able to slip in August, September, and he said, December, lady, December's the soonest. And I thought, oh, great, the week before Christmas, no one's going to show up, but this is wonderful, so thank you. What I thought I could do tonight is maybe talk for about, 15, 20 minutes or so, and then open it up to Q&A. Just this being a more intimate group and faith playing a big role. Driving here, I was thinking I may be more transparent with most of you than I have with some of my other speaking gigs this summer. So please know that I will knock on wood saying this no question is off limits. But I do teach at UNO, and I have a very good way of deflecting a student's question. So we'll see how that goes. And I'm fighting just a little bit of a cold, so excuse me. But anyway, I grew up here in Omaha, as I mentioned, grew up in South Omaha. I went to Holy Ghost grade school, which rest in peace is no longer. Don't ask my mother to talk about it, but the Archdiocese closed the school several years ago. My grandpa went there, she went there, and my sister and I went there. It's at about 52nd and Q Streets, and then went to Gross High School and graduated from there in 1997. So it's been a while. And from kind of a faith perspective, I went through the motions of the sacraments and really was eager to go to Gross as I think about it and reflective on it, not so much for the faith base of it, but because so many of my friends went there. There were several that were going to Bryan, some were going to some of the other Millard schools, but a lot of them went to Gross, and that's really what pulled me there. But I will say, Gross is the reason that I am a writer today. I was working for I was taking a student newspaper my senior year at Gross, and my job was just to sell advertising for the newspaper. It was not really to write. Because I thought I wanted to major in business, because when you're a senior in high school and you have no idea what to major in and you have to check a box, I said business, and so that's what I put on my paperwork for UNO. And thought, okay, I don't know what that means, but sure. I hated math. I was terrible with money, so of course that seemed like a good career path. Well, anyway, it was my senior year, and someone didn't turn in a story for the newspaper. Paw Prints was the name of Gross's paper, and they asked me to write it, and I thought, well, I like to read, and I enjoy writing school term papers, so sure. Well, I wrote it, and it came out. I think it was maybe about the marching band, I don't know, and I just fell in love with it, and I thought, I think I could do this. So before I graduated from Gross and started at UNO that fall, I went back to campus and changed my major. I waved my hand and said, we are not doing business, we are going to do journalism. And so I finished writing for the school paper my senior year, and then started writing for the Gateway the minute I set foot on campus, and just loved the experience. High school was fine. I just felt like I didn't fit in, like how many of us have that, right? So when I got to the Gateway, I felt like I really belonged, and we had our own office on campus, and it became really, and I wrote in my previous book, in several ways, it became my religion, and I really kind of stopped going to church because I was at the paper all the time, and that was my community, and that was my saving grace. I still certainly considered myself a spiritual person, but as far as that clunky phrase of practicing Catholic, that none of that was happening at all. And I just fell into the newspaper world, and just a little bit about my career path. While I was there 2 or 3 years, I worked my way up to editor-in-chief, and then I started doing some freelance writing in the community for Omaha Magazine, The Reader, a couple other publications that have since folded, and then for a hot minute thought I wanted to do TV news. So I got an internship at Channel 3, and within like 3 months, it was minimum wage, but I was working the morning show. I thought, I love these people, and I love journalism, but I do not want anything to do with television. In my world, like, I just wanted to tell the story, and I thought there was too much stuff that got in the way of the story in terms of like video cameras and just everything that goes into a TV broadcast. So I finished out my internship there for about 2 years, and then after graduation from UNO, I picked up a part-time job at the Papillion Times newspaper for about a year, and then I landed what has become one of my most treasured jobs, is working for the Bellevue Leader. Are any of you from Bellevue by chance? Okay. Oh, one. Okay.
I work in Bellevue.
Oh, one. Okay, that counts. We're gonna bring that in. But I loved it. The offices are in this dumpy brown building on Fort Crook Road between 2 car dealerships. And my editor, Ron Petak, who is very devout Catholic, I will say, and wonderful, one of the best bosses I ever had, was there for 4 years, did feature writing, covered school board, city council. 2 problems, I shouldn't say problems, 2 opportunities. One is I was working a ton of hours, so I really had no social life. 2, I was making $19,000 a year. So to keep working there, I moved back home with my mom because I couldn't afford it, and I picked up a second job answering the telephone at a mobile home sales park on the weekends, because I thought, I have to do this newspaper thing. Like, it is in me, I love it, and after a year of essentially working 7 days a week, I just couldn't do it anymore. And so professionally, going down that career path, I had a couple options. I could stay in newspapers but move out of Omaha. I'm sure I could find a job somewhere. Or I could transition out of newspapers entirely and receive endless grief from my friends who are still in it, calling me a sellout, and move into public relations, which is a very common career path for folks who work in journalism and media. And especially now in times like these with the media, secure jobs are fewer and far in between. And so I just feel like I was pioneering what everyone was gonna do 10 years later. So I transitioned out of newspapers and then had a number of public relations jobs. And without leaving newspapers, I never would have written my first book, because I was not writing on a regular basis that really fed me creatively. And so as a result of that, I started writing on the side, and I was blogging at the time. And then a small publisher in Omaha found my blog, and they approached me and said, would you ever want to do a collection of essays? And I really had never considered it. So after a series of events that came out, that book, Nerdy 30, came out in 2010. And so that kind of kept me fed from a writing perspective. And so I worked in public relations, like I said, for about 7 years. I worked for a small agency, I worked for Cox Communications, and then I worked in the PR office at UNO, which is how I got back to campus and started teaching while I was working on my master's degree. And so felt very at home at UNO, but after about 4 years of working there, I was kind of feeling the itch professionally about what to do next, and I didn't want to just like go to another PR job. And a friend of mine, Kevin Warnicki, who works at the Steyer Group, called me one day and he's like, Wendy, have you ever thought of doing doing fundraising? And I said, absolutely not. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, you had someone from the Steyer Group here speak this year. Okay, so number of phone calls and meetings, I ended up working for the Steyer Group. And so very truthfully, Jim and Mary Steyer and that opportunity is really what brought me to, there's two instances. That job brought me back to my Catholic faith because as was it Dan Howard, if I'm remembering correctly, was your speaker maybe?
Don't look at me.
Okay, you're nodding.
You're just
He was?
discussing.
Okay, thank you. I remember seeing his photo. I thought, oh, Dan. So anyway, if he spoke to you at all about what the Steyer Group does, they hire really amazing, talented communicators and teach them how to fundraise, essentially, if they don't have fundraising experience. So I was running capital campaigns in Catholic churches all across the country. So how can you not start thinking about religion when you were going to church literally for your job every week? One of my favorite parishes that I worked with, that I write about in Letters to Barley, is St. Francis de Sales in Lansing, Kansas. They were in a very small, formerly church building that was their offices, so the only place they had to set me up when I was there every Tuesday through Thursday was in the dressing room for Father. So I would usually get there before he did, and then as he comes in, he opens the closet and starts getting out his investments. And I've been seeing some of those photos pop up in my Instagram memories of working in there. And so that, and I don't know that I ever really had a lengthy conversation with Jim Steyer about this, but that really brought me back to it. The other experience that did, just to be very candidly, is my husband going through very severe opioid addiction. That had started unbeknownst to me while I was working at the Steyer Group. And so we were engaged, and then we got married, and then that's when he came out to me not long after that he had been struggling with that for several years. So he went through a number of very intense surgeries based on accidents, injuries that he suffered from several years ago. As far as I know, there's no addiction in our family. When I reflect upon it now, I think, yeah, Uncle so-and-so probably drank too much, or Aunt so-and-so probably drank too much. But as far as someone being like a admitted addict and knowing what that's like and having the support system, complete foreign to me. So I about lost my you-know-what going through that, and also dealing with this while I'm away out of town making a living for us. And so God works in mysterious ways, and I'm very, very adamant in thinking that that job and Matt's addiction kind of brought me back to the church in a really big way. The other thing that happened at this time is we adopted a dog, Barley. When I think about it now, I was gone a lot. Matt, if he were here, he would chuckle, but was higher than a kite a lot of days. So we thought, let's get a dog. You can't take care of yourself. I can't take care of myself or you. So let's bring in something that's completely helpless. And let's take care of it together, which means Wendy does everything. And I was not raised with dogs, but he had been wanting a dog for several years before the addiction really became part of our story. We have a fenced-in yard, and he was listing off this litany of reasons why we should, and I was like, well, let's wait till we get engaged, because then I know you're serious. Well, then we did, and then I was like, let's wait till we get married, and then we did. And so it was actually through a very good friend of mine at the Steyer Group that we found Barley, who's a Westie. In a turn of events, a family was getting transferred to Germany for the husband's job, so we drove out there and met Barley, and we kind of looked and said, yeah, we'll take Barley. And then we told the family, we'll take him, and when you're ready to move, we'll come back. And they're like, oh, you could just have him right now. Which is, in hindsight, terrible when I think about the dog. So we often joke that, like, if ever we drop Barley off somewhere, he's probably like, so is this going to be the last time I see you? But it's been very sweet because I've kept in touch with Barley's first family and just would send them photos. And then we got another dog, another Westie named Teddy about 4 years ago. And so I emailed her, the family, and have been fun keeping in touch with them. And their daughter was, less than a year when we adopted Barley, and the daughter's probably 5 now, but she says, we show her your photos and she remembers Barley living with them, which is just very sweet. So Barley made me a complete dog person, which I hated those people growing up. My stepmom was one and I didn't understand it, but I'm all in. But Barley definitely became a comfort dog for me. and I have to assume to Matt during all of that time. And so essentially, the origin of the book came about because we were like in the throes of this really dark place in our lives, and we had just adopted Barley, and I needed to just like get away. And so I went and saw a woman, her name's Melissa Coplin, and she is a life coach / therapist / speaker, and she's also a writer. And I met with her and was just really candid with her, and this was in 2015 about what I was going through. And she's like, you need to get away for a week, and I'm listing off all the reasons why I couldn't. And she said, no, you need to go, and I know about this week-long writing retreat that's on Whidbey Island off the coast of Seattle, and you will go, and I think it will help give you some clarity. And so when I looked at the travel dates, it landed when it was during my birthday, and I thought, I think this is a sign that I'm supposed to go, among other things. The fact that our life at home was a disaster, I needed to get out. That was a big sign too. But anyway, so I went, and the point of this workshop is you're in a very small collective of about 10 or 15 other people. This was all women. I had no idea the ages of the women when I landed, but they were all in their 60s and 70s, and I was in my early 30s. But it was a beautiful week, and the point is that you spend 5 days together writing about something in your life. It does not have to be traumatic. It does not have to be sad or life-changing. But I went there with that really weighing on my heart of what we were going through. And so thinking about what was going on at home, I thought, okay, my essay for the week is going to be a letter to Barley, telling him what was going on in our family and in our house when we adopted him. So that's one of the letters that's in the book. And at the end of your time together, we're in a circle and we meditate and all this, and we all read our letters, and everyone is crying, and some of the women are menopausal, and it was just like, which I am knocking on that door right now, so when I reflect on it, I think, yes, I know. And it was a really great experience. And so at the very end of that, Christina Baldwin, who is like this sage, wonderful woman, she goes, Wendy, I think there's a book here with several letters to Barley. And at that point, it had been 8 or 9 years since my first book came out, and I thought, I think this could be the path for me to write this next book, because I really wrestled with what to write. I didn't like fiction at all, and this seemed like really a good place to land. And so I will tell you, the book is not entirely sad. It is not all about Matt's addiction or what I was going through, but that is really what prompted it. But the other piece that really kind of bubbled up for me as I was working on this last year was returning to my Catholic faith and what a role that played in me and in my life. And Matt's family is Methodist, and we were just talking about this, my mom and I, on Saturday, because she goes, I remember when you called me and you said, Mom, I met a guy, and my mom said, and is he Catholic? And I said, no, he's Methodist, but I'm not planning to convert. And she just said, I felt so good when I heard you say that. And I'm like, that's terrible, because they're really good people, but I was raised in the Catholic bubble, as some of you may have been. I experienced no one else who wasn't Catholic until I was 19 years old, and so that was kind of a shock to me. So anyway, what was the point of that story? I don't know. Just that it came up recently. But anyway, that piece of kind of coming back to my Catholic faith was a big story in the book. And then also, while I was on the road, we were gifted with Pope Francis, and I believe today is his birthday, if I read on Facebook, which is like adorable. And so while I was in Lansing, Kansas, that's when they went through the whole song and dance about getting a new pope. I'm butchering what that's called, and I know I researched it for the book. But anyway, that really left a mark on me, and I really didn't realize it until much later. But also in further research, St. Francis de Sales is the patron saint of writers. So like the irony of that while I was there and it all coming together really played in beautifully. So what I thought I could do is, I won't read that whole chapter, but I'll read part of it for you, of that experience and when I was working at St. Francis de Sales. And again, I can rattle on forever, but I'd love to hear your thoughts or answer questions too. Then maybe we could sing happy birthday to Pope Francis. I don't know. He's probably in bed. Okay. On February 11th, 2013, the Vatican issued a stunning statement. For the first time in nearly 600 years, a pope was planning his resignation. Pope Benedict would formally step down from the papacy and out of his signature red Prada shoes on February 28th, citing old age and poor health. The Catholic Church, recently plagued by reports of horrific child abuse and its subsequent cover-up, was awash in turmoil. During times of crisis, many organizations can either be damaged from a leadership change or be set on a road to recovery. For the next 3 weeks, speculation swirled about who would step in as the Catholic Church's next vicar of Christ during such trying times. Once a news junkie, always a news junkie, I kept my rental car's satellite radio turned to the Catholic channel, channel 129, each week. I clicked through countless news articles about the search for a new pope and was even assigned to pray for one of the 115 Catholic cardinals during the 2013 papal conclave. One of the 115 would be named pope in the coming days. During my hours in transit listening to Catholic Channel and while conversing with parishioners at St. Francis de Sales, unknowingly I was growing in my faith as a lapsed Catholic. Now this is a letter to Barley, so you're going to hear like I'm talking to him, which while reading out loud seems very odd since he's not sitting here. And Barley, I was also growing in my love of dogs. 2 of the parish's staff members own dogs and spent a great deal of their time swapping stories and photos of their beloved pets. I enjoyed listening to these stories more than I thought I would. And then came you, Barley, just a few years later. A good friend once said, history doesn't matter until we have questions. In a matter of weeks, as news flowed from the Vatican and Catholic experts alike, my curiosity about Catholicism grew by leaps and bounds. I felt a small stir when overhearing conversations about the papacy, about who our next leader could be. And then came the conversations about the smoke. Behold to historic traditions, the papal conclave is essentially a very big, very secret meeting. Cardinals from across the globe were literally locked inside the Vatican until they elect the next pope. It was an experience known as sede vacante, the Latin phrase meaning the seat is vacant. And like so many who came before, a series of votes were taken among the cardinals. A 2/3 majority was required to elect a new pope. In an effort to update a world anxiously awaiting the news, smoke was released through the Sistine Chapel's chimney. Black smoke meant no pope had been elected. Spanning 5 votes over 2 days, white smoke finally and miraculously poured from the historic chimney the early afternoon Kansas time of March 13th. 2 parish staffers and I grabbed lunch at the nearby Mexican restaurant that day. When we returned to our desks about an hour later, I clicked over to Twitter. Scanning my feed, I saw the same 2 words over and over, white smoke. White smoke! White smoke! I yelled to anyone who would listen. I raced out past the closets of Father's vestments and into the business manager's office, which as it turned out once served as the reconciliation room. At that point, the business manager pulled up CNN on her computer. Having no television in the building, the 4 of us crammed around the monitor and watched the live video feed streaming from Vatican City. We waited for what felt like hours. The hundreds of thousands, Catholics and otherwise, who were crowded in St. Peter's Square grew silent. Curtains shield the center balcony of St. Peter's Basilica. The curtains shielding the balcony began to move. The silence deepened. Habeas papam, succinctly declared the cardinal, and I'm not going to pronounce his name because I researched it was too long. In Latin, we'll just call him the cardinal. And in Latin it translates to, we have a pope. The square and the whole world erupted in celebration. But for whom were these cheers directed? We soon found out. Jorge Mario Bergoglio of Buenos Aires. He met his new flock wearing simple white vestments and a gentle smile. His first words just as humble in Italian, good evening. He continued, speaking not from script but from his heart. You know that the duty of the conclave was to provide Rome with a bishop. It looks as if my brothers, the cardinals, went to fetch him from the end of the world. I'd like to thank you for your welcome. To the people of Rome, thank you. The parish secretary kindly offered me a tissue. Warm tears unexpectedly seeped from my eyes at the kindness of this holy and mysterious man. I cried for bearing witness to this vitally important chapter in the Catholic Church's tumultuous history, for feeling something familiar dating back to my earliest childhood memories, to my Catholic ancestors on my mother's side and my father's side, for hearing my grandmother's AM radio broadcast, a daily reading of the Rosary, for the prayer cards tucked away in the bottom drawer of my jewelry box, for the worn Bible that belonged to my mother as a child, the rosaries I received over the years, plastic purple to ruby red, for the comfort in the Catholic Mass, each refrain and action leading into the next. Barley, the comfort I felt as a Catholic returned like your soft, warm fur on a cold winter's day. It felt like a protective gesture by someone else that quietly suggested, "Remember me?" We stood together for many more moments, listening to our new Pope and finding ourselves in awe of this historic moment in history. We are here. We are seeing this, hearing this, feeling this. And we were doing so with millions of others around the globe. What a sight it was to see. What an experience it was to feel. We didn't say so, but I could tell we felt connected by what we were sharing. The St. Francis de Sales staff and this stranger from Omaha. We were now linked by this deep experience, this sacred memory. Where were you when Pope Francis was introduced to the world? I can tell you not only where I was, but how I felt, and most importantly, how I was changed. My next steps carried a renewed faith in the Catholic Church, a new longing to show up, participate, and be counted. Since my time in Lansing, Barley, I have grown in my Catholic faith. And with gratitude to Catholicism, I better see how my life's calling to serve has its roots in my faith. I'm reminded of a special prayer known as the Prayer of St. Francis. The musical version resonates with me the most. It holds a special place in my heart, and every single time brings me to tears. I have found no better description of my role in this world, simply to help others as often as I can, everywhere I can. And that's it. Thank you. And I love it so much that I got a part of it tattooed on my arm last year. That hurt like a you know what, but it's so awesome. So with that, any questions? I would entertain anything. Like I said, not much is off limits, but I'll just mention I've been a member of St. John Vianney Catholic Church for about 5 years now. Do you go there? Okay. Yeah. I lecture. I'm often at 7:30. I become a 7:30 devotee with all the old people. I'm more of an 11. Okay. I used to be, and then I signed up to lecture, and the lady said, "Well, how do you feel about 7:30? We never can get anybody to lecture at 7:30." And so I'm like, "Yes, that's fine." If any of you go to those masses, they usually don't have music. They're quick, and I always joke with Father Reiser that I get home and my coffee is still warm because it's so quick. But anyway, okay, small world.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
If you go there occasionally, you'll see me out with this.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was 11:30 for a while, and then I changed up. Yep. So, questions at all? Yes.
So you mentioned Pope Francis' election as a pivotal moment in your faith journey.
Yeah.
Were there any other moments leading up to that led to that? I mean, you mentioned the church you're at, but kind of before that.
Nothing really, because quite frankly, I didn't think I needed it. I think that's the big thing, and I think going through mass addiction changed everything, and being in the church setting week after week for 2.5 years. I mean, that just is going to rub off on you. And I was adamant. I shouldn't say I was adamant. I didn't think that it would. I thought, well, this is just another job, and I'm Catholic, and I can play this game like anybody else. I know how it rolls. And I didn't love all the churches I worked at. I mean, staff dynamics being what it is, but something about this little scrappy church in Lansing and going through that historic moment was pretty amazing. So, yeah.
Talking about your husband's addiction, how did you find out, and then what were your initial reactions, and then
yes.
How have you guys recovered as a couple and individually?
How much time?
I find that
no,
very
absolutely.
So.
I know. I'm glad you asked. I was like, do I have therapy scheduled? Maybe we could just cancel that. What is this? Okay. So first question is. He had been addicted to opioids, I think probably 3 years. when I think back now, I clearly can see the signs and the symptoms. At the time, I had no clue. Extrovert, creative guy, works at all hours. His parents are night owls. They go to bed. At times, he didn't. That should have been a red flag. But anyway, he told me the weekend he was a groomsman in one of his good friend's weddings, where we were going to be committed all weekend to all this stuff. And he talks about that now, but kind of his moment where he realized he needed help and to tell everybody is they were at the rehearsal dinner, and if you know anything about opioid addiction, if you try to get sober by stopping, your body goes into horrible withdrawals, diarrhea, vomiting, sweating, insomnia. It's terrible. So in his mind, he's like, well, I need to be sober for my friend's wedding, so I'm going to stop taking pills, which meant at the rehearsal dinner, he's outside puking his guts out. And so that's when he realized, this is one of my best friends, oldest friends, and I'm like this. So he told me the night before. So that we had to go, and I look at the pictures of us at the wedding, and I just think, oh my Lord, Jesus, where are you? We need you. So anyway, that's when he told me. I realized that I suffer from anxiety when I'm put into situations like that. So for me personally, anxiety became a big problem for me. I talk about it in the book. So that was huge. We didn't, I'm trying to think, some of the years are kind of fuzzy, but we told his parents, we told my dad and his wife, my stepmom, because I had a stepsister who was going through alcoholism. And that was horrible. So, but we didn't tell my mom. I should say I did not tell my mom. At the time, within that year, she was also diagnosed as type 2 diabetic and was in very poor health. So pile it on. So I just was I don't think she's in the right place to take this on. But that just shows you how addiction can mess with you, because it wasn't about me, it was about how everybody else was doing. And any good therapist will tell you, you have to take care of yourself first before you can care for anybody else. So as I often tell people, and I've shared this with my therapist, I hate with that addiction having to go through it, but I love the person that I became as a result of it, because I take no BS from anyone. There is such little gray area in my life right now, and I don't mean right or wrong. I'm is this good for me? Is it bad for me? It's very simple, and I will say the boundaries that I had to learn how to create to take care of myself and survive was a gift that I just didn't think I needed, or it wasn't necessary for me to have a happy life before this happened. So as far as our marriage, about a year ago, and I should look at the calendar on the date, but it happened in December, and Matt has been sober now almost 4 years. But we were, yes, thank you. I said this at a speaking engagement a couple weeks ago, and everyone started clapping, and I was like, that's wonderful, thank you. But anyway, when we got married 7 years ago, I was not really into the Catholic faith, and we wanted to get married outside, and as you know, that's not going to roll with the Catholic Church, so I found a easygoing Jesuit from Creighton who said, I'll show up, you'll have the cap, there'll be a gentleman in a collar. I love the Jesuits, I love them. And so Matt's dad is a pastor in the Methodist Church, and so we wanted him to marry us, but we wanted to get married in the Rose Garden at Memorial Park. And so, to appease my mom, because at that point it was all just for her, because I really wasn't going to church, I'm like, we'll get this Jesuit that I found from a friend of mine who was Jewish, and I had never met the guy. He showed up, he did the thing, and it was okay, we're good. So anyway, Matt was going through addiction on our wedding day, and I was not. I didn't find out till we had been married several months. But we got into it about a year ago, and kind of all of this came out for me, and I said to him, I was like, I look at our wedding pictures, and I'm embarrassed, because we were going through this right now, and I feel like an idiot. I look at those photos, and I think I'm so stupid. So what does Matt do? He texts my mom and says, I want to get our marriage blessed by the Catholic Church. So within 2 weeks by Christmas, he put together this lovely scrapbook with his mother's help. And he had contacted Father Reiser at St. John Vianney. He had no idea what he was signing himself up for because he thought we were just going to show up on a Friday and like get a little sign. No. They assigned us to a couple in the parish, and it's not like Focus. We didn't obviously go through Focus, but it's not, Matt kept calling it a vow renewal, but Father's like, it's a validation ceremony. So this is not like, we're just going to let you come in and sign on the dotted line. So anyway, long story short is one of my Christmas gifts was he had scheduled a year in advance within a day of our wedding anniversary, which was the 21st. So we went through that process this summer, met with a wonderful couple and had to take some quizzes, which brought some stuff out that we still joke about now. And we had a lovely, very intimate ceremony in the little adoration chapel there on a Friday afternoon. It was like 20 people. It was the most memorable day. I think it was better than our wedding day for countless reasons. But we loved it, and it was such and obviously Matt's doing it for me. I mean, at the end, there's always like, where Father's like, well, I feel like, he didn't say this directly, but it's like, and here's a brochure about the Catholic Church. And Matt's like, I'm good. I said, well, I'll take it, Father. I'm sure there's something in there I could learn, which would not be the case, because like, I know everything about it. But it was a really beautiful day, and like, I have friends, very close friends of other faiths, and they were there, and it was just nothing like our actual ceremony, but we really needed to do it, and I just didn't think that was an option, and so thank you for asking. So most days we're in a good place. I mean, it's like, and I say that jokingly, like marriage is still hard. It's, I would say, is there baggage from that? Oh, undoubtedly. And it bubbles up occasionally, and there's things where, I'm thinking, putting him in the box of where he was when he was still a functioning addict, and he's not anymore, and I'm sure he's looking at me at certain times. But I mean, that's, you're crazy if you think going through that's not going to change the marriage in some capacity and bring us in a place that we didn't anticipate. So that was like big, and then so that was just a couple months ago that we did that. So yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah. Yes.
While you were going through all of that, did you guys ever consider a divorce? And if you did, how did you work through that to try and not actually get divorced?
Yeah. I did not. Part of me thinks it's like that subconscious Catholics don't get divorced, even though my parents got married in the Catholic Church and got divorced. I think, to be very candid, I was such a mess that I did not even think of that. Like, I wasn't even thinking in those terms. Now, and I shared this with Matt, I said, if I was the person I am now when we were going through this, there's no way I would have stayed. There's no way. Which makes me sad, but it also is a little affirming to know that that's kind of my boundaries. But it really never was an option. It's not something I really just thought about, and I think that's also God's grace, not letting that thought just fester. And I was very private about it. I mean, I think there were 2 people I told very truthfully of what was going on. And with me working at the Star Group, I was never here. So I was working with strangers who knew not a thing about me, or knew whatever I chose to share with them when I was there. Yeah. Yes.
With Letters to Barley being like a real personal book, it seems like, what was it like going through kind of the editing process or shopping around to get it published and all that?
Thank you. Good question. We can talk about that. So I went to the original publisher of Nerdy 30. They had been purchased by another publisher, and unless you're like Stephen King or anybody on Oprah's book list, if you're getting a book out there as the author, you are fronting some of the costs, which also means you're taking on some of the risk. So this publisher, I sent them the manuscript, and she had some changes already, and there were a couple things that I wanted to do. I said, I want to control the cover, because I did with my first book, and I was very pleased with how it turned out. But I also want to know, when we're making edits to the inside, how much control I have, and she's like, well, we can't give you all the control, and you're probably going to have to pay us $5,000 or $7,000. And I said, I'm going to have to pay you, but I can't control everything from start to finish. I mean, if this is my story. So then that's where I kind of started talking to some other local writers, and the Amazon publishing platform came about. So I was a little skeptical, at first, because I thought, oh God, I'm gonna be one of those $2.99 romance novels that are just like riddled with misspellings, and even the reviews are terrible. But I realized, like, knowing just people I knew in the community, I was like, okay, if I can, and I knew of them, like solid graphic designer, solid copy editor, get people to read the manuscript. As long as the finished product is solid, then it's on me to get out there and hustle it. And so that's what I did. So I absorbed all of the costs for Letters to Barley. I need to say we, because it's my husband and I's money. We absorbed all the costs together. So we fronted all that, and I think all in it was maybe about $1,000, and then it doesn't really cost anything to publish it on Amazon. They just take a cut out of every book you sell. And really, my goal was to get this story out there. It wasn't to sell a ton of books or go on a national speaking circuit, because I still have a full-time job. I teach. I'm a big crafter, and like I want time to do all that. So I liken it to being an Uber driver. I'm on when I'm on, and when I don't want to be, I don't want to be. So this was a really good fit for me. I also think just putting the story out there about addiction was really important, and one of the things that I've kind of learned through all this is if you go through anything like that, all of that pain is wasted if at the other end you don't use it to help somebody else or to teach somebody else. And I thought, damn it, if I'm gonna have to go through this, I want to try to help other people. So that was really kind of the path I took with it, and it's been really great. So I did some book signings this summer that were good, that helped book sales, and got a little bit of social media coverage, and then I'll put something out there. I've got probably a couple book signings in the new year too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
How cutthroat was journalism for you to get out of it?
It was about a year of interviews because I had no PR experience. The only public relations experience I had was, I get calls from annoying PR people all the time pitching stories, so I know what they need in terms of elements of a story. So who better to pitch them stories than someone who used to be on the receiving end of the press releases. So it took about a year, and I didn't want to move, so my options were limited. And I remember very vividly in college, my senior year, Karen Weber telling me, like, Wendy, you really need to take a couple PR classes. And I was like, Karen, I'm going to be in journalism until I'm dead. Like, don't even try to tell me that I'm leaving the profession. But so it was probably about a solid year. But it's very common, and sadly, looking at how the journalism profession has changed and the whole fake news, regardless of where you are politically, these are people's professions, and I'm teaching students every semester who want to get into journalism. And so I feel in a lot of ways that keeps me connected to the profession, as I can go to campus and play journalist, which I like. But I don't have the crazy hours.
Do we have time for like one more question?
Sure, maybe right back there.
Yeah, sure. So
Yeah.
I just was wondering, like, how did you get into the teaching? You said that you were working PR at UNO while you were doing like your master's degree. And, like, was it like a grad student thing that kind of led into, I actually enjoy this?
Yeah, so I had spoken to a couple PR classes while I was working there, and Dr. Jeremy Lipschultz came up to me, and he's like, Wendy, have you ever thought of teaching? And I was like, no, not interested. And he's like, well, we're piloting this new online journalism class, and it's only 6 students, and it's half online and half in person throughout the semester, and we'll pay you. And I was like, I think I can do this. And I was like, I'm coming to campus every day to work, and I have a parking pass, so why not? That was like stupid, but anyway. So that was 10 years ago, and so I will say candidly, I don't think I would ever have the patience to teach college full time. I just know that, but I love, this group of students was very hard to leave this semester. We met last week for that last time, but I love it. I love it enough though to know that I just wouldn't want to do it full time, but that's how it is. And many of the campus departments at UNO, and I think at a lot of colleges, really rely on adjunct. I never thought of it as kind of like a bonus job that I had, but I do it and I just love it, so yeah. So I will be here hanging out. I do have books for sale, no pressure, but they're $12 each if you're at all interested. There's little postcards, and if you really want them, I have circle stickers of just Barley's head. So thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.